It's also bound to affect the chances of some of the fancied team in the unlimited class. Another important aspect, of course, it could increase the chances of a 750 class motorcycle taking out the outright championship for the first time ever in the Castrol 6 Hour. We'll have all the excitement for you right from the start now up until the finish at 4 o'clock. So stay with us. It's 1 minute from the start of the Castrol 81. Here's John Smales with Will Hagan.
Grid positions for the 1981 Castrol 6 Hour, with 5 Suzuki GSX 1100s on the top 5 positions. You can see there the pole position bikes on identical times, and then with Johnson Pretty third fastest, the next 2 on similar times, so that the positions are very close indeed. The fastest of the non-Suzukis is this 1100 Yamaha of Warren Willing and Rodney Brown from Queensland, winners of the Yamaha 750 race earlier this year on a Yamaha 750, so they're nicely teamed. And then we come down to an XJ 750 Yamaha slotting itself in among the big bikes in the top 10, a remarkably good effort, and followed by 2 750 Suzukis doing the same.
The rain continues to pour down, and sensation in the pits as the favoured Wayne Gardner-Rob Phyllis team tries to switch to a 750cc motorcycle, perhaps more suited to these conditions, but they've been disallowed by the stewards and they'll be on the big 1100. There are only 13 unlimited bikes in the Castrol 6 Hour. The rest are all 750cc machines, and in the wet the pressure is really on from the small bikes. It's deja vu. It rained here at Amaroo Park this time last year. Wayne Gardner and Andrew Johnson won it brilliantly in the wet. But today could be another story entirely. There has never been such a close Castrol 6 Hour as this. 1.4 seconds separating the top 10 bikes, and anything can happen on these wet conditions.
It's a wet, cold and miserable scene at Amaroo Park, but a very tense one as the riders with 30 seconds to go are lined up for the unique Le Mans start for the 12th Castrol 6 Hour. 32 machines along the pit rail there being held by pit assistants, 32 riders to the left, waiting so tensely now to get out and to battle the ferociously slippery, wet conditions on the 1.9 kilometre Amaroo Park circuit. Hours of hard riding, slippery riding in front of them.
Roger Hayes first away on the Suzuki, behind him Neville Shivers, also Suzuki.
Clean start, there's 32 bikes, plumes of spray behind them getting away, and riders gingerly feeling out the track. Bike number 7 in the lead, Roger Hayes, doing a first stint as he did last year with the Dennis Neal pairing on the 1100 Honda. Clear through Dunlop Loop. The travelling marshals, as you can see, taking it easily. In second place behind them, the David Hiscock, the New Zealander, sharing with Neil Chivers, another of the Suzukis. And in third place, bike number 1, the Dave Peterson, the South African, Neville Hiscock, older brother of the Hiscock family, another 1100 Suzuki in third. Honda corner, the slowest corner on the track. Quite obviously the potential problem of this year with the new regulations on sticking to standard tyre sizes. And we look at fourth place at number 5, Greg Pretty, the South Australian, sharing with Andrew Johnson. So it's Suzuki's in the first 4. But quite obviously potential tyre problems now quite eliminated with the wet. The problem now is one of adhesion and of rider tiredness and coldness, fatigue, as Hayes slips back to second place and under a lot of pressure from all of the 3 that were with him in the first 4. 16 there in fourth place, Warwick Hall and Rod Price sharing an 1100 Yamaha, doing a great job, and qualified very well yesterday on one of 3 1100 Yamahas.
Wayne Gardner sitting back from the leading bunch, letting them sort themselves out. Neville Hiscock in the lead. Behind him Roger Hayes, behind him David Hiscock. There goes Hayes up the inside. And Hayes battling for the lead here. While they're sorting themselves out, you can see from the way that the back wheels are moving around that they are trying.
Hiscock with the incentive of masking tape, a large dollar sign shown on the speedo of the bike. The pit crew reckon to keep him going. The two rider nicknames Animal and Wally. Hayes likes to be known and is known around the motorcycle racing scene as Animal. Twice winner of the race, 76 and 78. Second place now, David Hiscock. There's a grand shot of Amaroo Park, the Dunlop Loop. You've never seen that before. That constant radius, you can see the differing radius there, but that down the bottom of the screen is the exit, which is taken in a continuous swoop, in fact, and then out to the curbing, and then the fast run down the hill. They're going downhill as they go up screen from the bottom there, and they are very fast corners, those two right-handers, and then finally we pick them up at Honda.
Roger Hayes, no wet weather gear on. Oops, Roger Hayes.
But pulling away from his adversaries.
But he'll be wet and very cold in those leathers by the end of the first 2-hour riding stint. Behind him, Hiscock in wet weather gear, and then a bunch of Suzukis all together.
First flying lap, 69 seconds. Some 12 seconds outside their potential best. That'll quicken a little as they ascertain just what the limits are under brakes and round corners. Second place now, Neville Hiscock. Third place is Greg Pretty, the South Australian. On 5 there on bike. 6 you can see Wayne Gardner, the man who starred last year under very similar conditions in a tremendous scrap with John Pace, who unfortunately was injured here at the last meeting, a round of the Australian Road Racing Championships. He was to partner Andrew Johnson, but is recovering from a broken leg. Chopper shot again. On the bottom part of the circuit now, with the pond there on the left, coming down to stop corner. A beautiful shot will show you the tightness of that corner, particularly as it kicks up right at the apex there. And across the front of the spectator area, and then the wide sweeper of this right-hand corner leading on to pit straight, Breville Corner, past the pit area, the hill again. Hayes being pressed, though, by an advancing Neville Hiscock.
Oh, Hiscock very, very sideways across the top. They had to get it very much upright, but he takes the lead.
But with Wayne Gardner now in second, and Hiscock, Hayes is back to fourth, as you can well see, with Greg Pretty coming up to third. And in the bunch behind them, it's David Hiscock on the Neil Chivers bike he's sharing, bike number 2. Some adventure from Gardner, going for the lead, and is going to grab it. And I'm fairly certain we'll hang on to it there. Neville Hiscock slots behind him, and looking a bit adventurous too. Pretty, the South Australian, has done a lot of riding this year and has sometimes been unhappy with team arrangements.
And there's the first of the 750cc motorcycles coming up into contention. The Alan Blanco Bob Toomey bike, bike 26, has moved into 5th place in the race. So the 750 is starting to throw out a challenge too.
But another Suzuki, so Suzuki's dominating at the moment in both classes, Unlimited and 750. Have a look at another shot that you've never seen of Amaroo Park before. Again, the top of the circuit. And a most testing section of circuit too, where, as you can see from the embankments and so on, there's no escape. Gardner, and then Hiscock, Neville, the older brother. Gardner, the young Wollongong rider who finally, after 9 months of protest and counter-protest, has been declared winner of last year's race, and who's had such a good season as the rain now streams down. It is bucketing down, almost torrential rain, much more so than at the start of the race. But this Wayne Gardner has had a great season in England, second in the British Superbike Championship despite a break in mid-season due to an injury, and has agreed, after being offered 3 different factory rides, to ride for Honda next year on both Formula 1 and Superbikes, and the chance too of the greatest prestige of all, a ride in the 500 class on a new bike that Honda have got. This is coming out of Honda corner, again going down to stop. Then back at the top of the circuit with the race leaders. That's a 170 km/h right-hand corner in the dry, probably still 130, 140 kilometres an hour. That's how relaxed he is. Right in the apex of the corner where it kicks up, looking back over his shoulder to see how close Neville Hiscock is and what he's offering. And look at the traction he's getting, making the bike squirm and work there.
And already lapping now as he goes through Kevin Wichleo on the Honda CB900.
But finding out there the vagaries, which he knows only too well, of track conditions. He's lost his visor off his helmet, Wayne Gardner.
It's a pull-off, Will. He's actually got a number of visors on his helmet, and he's going to be pulling them off as he goes to keep vision going all the time. So that was the first of the tear-offs to go from Wayne Gardner's helmet.
Yes, you can see there that still perspex on the helmet, so Gardner perhaps a little bit better prepared than others for the conditions.
And Gardner, the master of late braking, as Hiscock tries to go underneath him. Gardner will have none of it at all. He can outbrake anybody on this track.
Onto pit straight comes the race leader. And 7 laps completed. On his 8th lap, Wayne Gardner, Neville Hiscock, already moving through the field. The next bike behind is a lapped one. So that the order behind them, in fact, is bike 5, Greg Pretty, but falling back slightly. The 750, number 26 of Alan Blanco. Then number 7, Roger Hayes, who was on pole position, got there by Malcolm Campbell, his co-rider yesterday, and who led away, but has now fallen to 5th. And behind him is David Hiscock, brother of the 2nd place Neville, and he's on bike 2. By there, Matt Noon riding bike 33, a 750 Suzuki, and Michael Coughlin on 37, a Ducati Panther.
Gardner told me this morning that his works contract with Honda in England was so important that he didn't anticipate he'd be going hard in this event. He was here simply to fulfill an obligation. Look at him go now. No matter what a racer says to you before he starts racing, don't believe it. When he gets out there, he'll go hard.
The rear suspension, which has got 5 different suspension settings on most of the lead bikes, was on a fairly soft setting, but notably on bike 5 and bike 2, it was on the stiffest suspension setting of all. And they are, of course, just a little way back, lying in 3rd and 6th place. In fact, Hayes has slipped back out of 6th, further back still. Race leader. That gives you an idea of how quickly he's travelling. Down to the stop corner, known officially as Winfield. Feather of throttle here, then feed it on. Now booted. And there's nearly 100 horsepower shoving him up the hill at an enormous rate of acceleration. 4th gear. They don't get into 5th around here, and he has a slide there in the early part of the corner. From that first flying lap of 69 seconds, time's now dropping to 67.3 for Wayne Gardner.
co-rider with Wayne Gardner, Rob Phillips. Rob, you're running 1 and 2 at the moment, and Wayne seems to be skipping away at the start of the event anyway, with 15 laps down. Are there any race tactics involved?
I think the main thing is to try and stay up the front, but not necessarily in first, but ride consistently smooth and do your best without doing anything stupid, and hang out for the 6 hours, and hopefully we're in the front at the finish.
Rob, Wayne, of course, is regarded as a pretty good wet weather rider. How do you regard yourself?
Well, I think Wayne is a brilliant wet weather rider, but I just hope I can hold my end of the deal up and ride as quick as I did in the rain last year without any incidents or anything this year. So I just hope for the best and I can do the right thing by him.
And a half lose there from Neville Hiscock as he comes through Honda Corner, as he now goes back under Greg Pretty to retake second place. So the great dice on now for second position between these two riders, bike 1 Neville Hiscock and Greg Pretty again underneath him as he comes onto the main straight. These guys are really racing. They are losing about 1 second a lap to the leader Wayne Gardner, who's now more than 11 seconds in front of them. But this is certainly turning into a dice for second position between these two Suzuki riders. Over the top for the last lap or so, Hiscock has been getting very skatey indeed on that Suzuki, and I think perhaps that he's decided that third position safely is better than second position all over the track. Pretty certainly smoother on the motorcycle, the man in the orange leathers. Hiscock appearing a little nervy on the bike, and yet he's the calmest of competitors. Much wider line through Honda Corner. Hiscock won the recent Yamaha, or rather Pirelli 3-hour race at Surface Paradise, his first big win for Suzuki. And see the way that Pretty gets his power down to the ground just a little bit earlier out of the stop corner. Hiscock's certainly not riding as smoothly or as progressively as Greg Pretty.
Averaging around this tight track under very wet and slippery conditions, just over the legal open road speed limit in most states of Australia. 103 kilometres an hour is their average speed. Two 750 class leaders are 22, just slotting itself into the lead. John Wood, the rider on a Suzuki 750, having overtaken the early class leader almost since the race start, Alan Blanco, on a similar bike. He's on 26, and as you can see, they are stuck right into it as they come up to lap a competitor. There are incidentally 14 bikes on the same lap as the leader, including this pair, because not only are they battling for the leadership in the 750 class, which is expected to be very hard fought all day, but they are lying 6th and 7th outright on the Phillips scoreboard. Here they come down the hill. Dennis Neal, these bikes probably just a touch easier to ride in the rain than the bigger and more powerful 1100cc machines.
Yes, well, I think the biggest reason would be because of the less weight and slightly less powerful engines. Don't come on with such a bang out of the corners, so it's a bit more controllable.
On the other hand, they need to be revved harder to get going, don't they? So that the riders can't back off down the rev range quite so much as they can on the big bike.
Yeah, that's also pretty true, but I think when around this track, even in the wet, your tacho very rarely drops below about 5,000, so both the unlimited and 750 size bikes these days pull very cleanly from those revs onwards, so it's not so important.
Dennis, you were fastest qualifier in the past 2 years, and of course your crash at Bathurst at Easter has put you out of this year. How would you like to be out there at the moment?
No, thank you very much.
It's not your greatest love, wet weather riding, is it?
No, I've had very little experience in it. I've been racing about 11 years now, and didn't encounter a wet meeting until about year 9, so I haven't had much experience at all.
What are the problems?
Problems is mainly the big loss of traction. It takes quite a long time of consistently pushing yourself harder and harder each lap to try and judge exactly where the distance is. I'm very surprised that there hasn't been more incidents so far, because we've had no rain here for a few weeks at Amaroo, and the track would be very slippery with all the rubber and oil and so on that's been dropped during the week.
So through and out of corners, you're more gentle on the throttle, a bit slower, feeding it on and less throttle, obviously.
Yeah, no vicious movements, just try and be as smooth as you can. And most of the guys I noticed this morning were setting their bikes up a little bit softer in the suspension, so there's a little bit more give. Most guys generally let their tyre pressures down by about 2 pounds as well. So hopefully your tyres will heat a little bit quicker than if they started with more pressure in them.
What about braking, particularly the balance between front and rear? You still use a lot of front brake?
Still mainly, yes, I'd say 80% still the front. It's amazing actually how hard you can brake in the wet. Approaching down there to Winfield Corner and stop, you can almost brake to the point you can in the dry. Brakes aren't as affected quite as much as you would think actually.
It's more the grip under acceleration out of corners.
Yeah, that's right. That's what it all is. It's just a big loss of traction of the back wheel.
So the 750 class lead at the moment going back to Alan Blanco in this hard dice. He's on bike 26 and therefore comes up to 6th outright, pushing John Wood, the New Zealander living now in Sydney, back to 7th place on bike 22. But both of them Suzuki's, so Suzuki's really dominating at the moment. Partially, of course, Dennis, because of the absence of Honda this year. The regulations effectively outing last year's winning bike, the 1100R, for reasons that it was a single-seat bike. But then the Honda factory decided not to be involved, or Honda distributors, and kept their riders out too.
Right, that's very unfortunate. I think it's certainly the race has lost a lot of the character and atmosphere that it's had in the past, and I really hope that Willoughby do change their mind next year and be a little bit more open on the rules, and in fact let the Hondas back in.
Well, Andrew, Greg Pretty, your co-rider at the moment, lying in 2nd place, and he seems to be making some sort of impression on Wayne Gardner. What do you feel his tactics will be now for the rest of his stint?
Well, Bob, I think it's pretty hard. It's only half an hour into the race so far. I think we'd just keep setting the pace behind him, not to try and overtake him, to push him, because he might have more in reserve. I'd hate to think he has, but just sit there and don't let anyone pass us. Remain in 2nd.
When's your scheduled first pit stop?
Well, we're not quite sure at this stage. Well, I'd say it'll be the 2-hour mark, but the hour 50 could be on too.
It's fairly conservative with this rain, isn't it, as far as fuel is concerned?
Yes, with the fuel, you're not using the maximum horsepower of the machine, because you're getting too much wheel spin if you do. So therefore, a tank of petrol will last you a lot longer, and of course your tyres will go straight through the whole race.
How do you feel about going out in the wet? You're a little bit nervous, you mentioned earlier.
Yes, I'm a little bit nervous. I don't like riding in the rain, but my job is a road racer, so that's it.
Here is a man in a real hurry, the South Australian Greg Pretty, here on bike number 5, ignoring the boundary lines as he comes out of Breville Corner onto pit straight. He's now pulled away from his adversary, battling for 2nd place. That was, for many laps, Neville Hiscock on bike number 1, but he's pulled out a few seconds advantage on him. But more importantly than that, he's reduced Gardner's maximum lead with 48 laps now completed. They're on their 49th. He's reduced Gardner's maximum lead of 17 seconds down now to under 7. And so he is having a real rush forward and very interested in trying to peg back the flying Wollongong rider. Both of them, of course, on 1100 Suzukis. But look how hard Pretty's working his. Goes down to Honda Corner now. And there you see him under power, getting the bike sliding sideways but not backing off at all, threading his way through the traffic. There are 8 bikes only on the same lap as the leader. And in fact, the race leader, Gardner, on 6, is coming up fairly shortly, within about 7 or so seconds, to lap the first non-Suzuki, the best placed non-Suzuki, which is Stephen Ball, the motocross expert, lying in 7th place on the Yamaha 1100 number 3. Here again from the air is Pretty. And there, just in front of the Ducati Panther number 9, being ridden by Graham Thompson. Building up speed now on one of the fastest sections of the circuit. Pretty, the battle with Gardner, and Pretty not very far apart on their 50th lap now. The battle then will become one between the co-riders, Rob Phillips partnering Gardner, the present race leader, and Andrew Johnson partnering Greg Pretty here on 5. Both competent in the wet and put in some excellent performances in the past, and probably fairly even, so it's going to be very interesting and looks as though it's going to be a hard race all the way. 50 laps completed. They're on their 51st now, and at the moment indicating around 320 odd laps as Gardner has to rescue, Pretty at least has to rescue a really big kick sideways there at the top of the hill, just as he was going through the apex of the fastest corner on the circuit. Just before that is actually his maximum speed as he gets just feathers and has a sighting for the apex of that corner at the top of the hill.
Coming up to lap 6th position outright in the race, bike 3, Stephen Gall on the Yamaha XS 1100, and the first Yamaha in the top 10 is Wayne Gardner, trying to slip under through the downhill section of the circuit, and he's got to be very cautious here. Gall stays wide for him, and now Wayne Gardner moves further into the lead ahead of these people, but behind him catching is Greg Pretty, now only 5 seconds behind. The only consolation Gardner has at this stage is that Pretty also has to get through the bunches of traffic between him. But Gardner rather has now lapped all but the top 5 riders in this race, and all top 5 now are Suzukis.
Life is not easy in motorcycle racing because this is Roger Hayes in 4th place, and the man right on his hammer wants 4th place from him is on the same lap. That is David Hiscock on bike number 2. They've been scrapping like this for a fair part of 60 laps. They're on their 61st lap now. They are the next bikes to be lapped by the race leader Gardner, so they're getting on towards 60 seconds behind him, but having a grand scrap. Dennis Neal, you know Roger well. You've known him since the 2 of you started in motorcycle racing. It's the sort of pressure that in some ways perhaps stops you worrying about the conditions.
That's right. Roger would really be thriving on this. He doesn't like the wet such as like myself, but when he gets aware of Dole, I'm sure he's aware now that Dave is there, but actually Dave's passed him, right? Roger will really get the bee under his bonnet now, I'm sure, because there's no love lost between Roger and Dave.
No, well, they had that great dice at Bathurst at Easter, over 20 laps in the production race there. Finally, of course, Roger looking as though he had him beaten, half a lap from home, then falling, and Hiscock came through.
Right, Roger's got a very long memory, and that'll be really sticking in his mind at the moment. I'm sure he'd really love to beat Dave here today.
When he gets that sort of intensity and that sort of problem, does he tend to lose concentration and get untidy, drop ground?
No, I think Roger thrives on that. That'll egg him on to go harder and harder.
He doesn't need a lot of egging on, though, does he?
No, it's pretty fiery. He's considering retiring, I think, reasonably shortly, and he'd like to go out on a high note, so I'm sure he'd be rapt to try and win the race today.
The race leader, in the meantime, has dropped to a 6-second margin only over Greg Pretty on bike 5, who's chasing him. It's come down from 17 seconds, went back out to 8, but Pretty has pulled it back. And in the pit area, let's hear from Dave Hiscock's co-rider, sorry, not Dave Hiscock's co-rider, but Roger Hayes' co-rider, Malcolm Campbell.
Well, with me at the moment, Malcolm Campbell, co-rider to Roger Hayes, who are lying 4th at the moment, and they're about 3/4 of a lap behind. Is that right?
Yeah, about 3/4 of a lap down on Wayne Gardner at the moment. Roger's just riding as the bike feels to him at a safe limit, and we're quite happy with the way he's going at the moment.
He doesn't really like the wet weather, does he?
No, neither do I.
You don't like it either, eh?
No.
So what are you hoping for? You're hoping that you can just slowly improve your standing, or are you just going to try and stick with the race leaders and hope that they fall off, or what?
Well, we'll just ride as Roger's riding at the moment at our own pace to midway through the race. I don't know whether we're going to see any sun later on or not, but we'll, you know, make up our mind whether we're going to extend ourselves sort of at the midway position of the race.
And right, you're looking for what, a 1 hour 50 or 2 hour fuel stop, is that right?
Oh, we can get well over the 2 hours, but we're not sure whether we're going for that or not. It just depends on how Roger's wrist handles the cold and everything like that.
Right, you both suffered pretty serious injuries. Roger's got a very bad wrist, you've got a bad leg. How's the cold going to affect you?
Well, I don't really know. It feels all right, but once I get wet in that, you know, it might slow it down a bit. I don't know, but it feels okay at the moment.
Lapping 4th position now, David Hiscock. On the outside of that bunch comes Wayne Gardner. Behind him, bike 7, Roger Hayes, has already been lapped by Wayne Gardner. That won't make Roger Hayes happy at all. Gardner can't get through Hiscock. Hiscock is not going to give up his line because he's involved in a dice himself. So Gardner's going to have a bit of difficulty getting through these two bikes as he's sandwiched between them at the moment. And there goes Gardner now, down in the braking area where he is so good. And all the time back in 2nd position, only 3 seconds behind, is Greg Pretty on the other Suzuki.
Down to Winfield Corner now. Still trying for all he can to peg back Gardner to take the lead before he has to make a pit stop. But having some hard time getting through the traffic, and in fact Gardner, plus some traffic problems, has taken the gap 1st to 2nd back out to 5.5 seconds. Still 3rd place is bike number 1, the Neville Hiscock ridden Suzuki 1100, which he'll hand over to South African Dave Peterson.
And Pretty talking to his pits both times round then. Lap before last he pointed urgently at his fuel tank. He may have had some sort of fuel surge problem. That time round he seemed to indicate that everything was okay again. In the dry, the bike should have pitted for fuel at about 1.5 hours. The informed knowledge in the pits is that they can stretch it out to about 2 hours in the wet.
Some inspired riding from the South Australian Pretty to pull back that lead. And here he comes, the first pit stop among the leading bikes, and that gives an indication of what he's been asking of the machine and how hard he's been riding. The consistency of Gardner versus the comeback from a 17-second leeway by Pretty has told, and in he comes to the pits on the 87th lap of the leader, 86 completed. And go again is the question, the reply yet to come. Andrew Johnson, the man now saying stick with it. Now 1 hour 38 minutes of riding and going out for a 2nd stint. The FIM regulations say that you cannot ride more than 3 hours in one stint or consecutively, so that Pretty now cannot do as long as a run as he's just done. He will have to come in a 1 hour 22 minute run before his next pit stop, and can only do 4 hours in total.
Pretty's pit stop was 18.2 seconds with that just over 20 litres of fuel. The cast doubt now on there's 23, the 2nd in the 750 class. Robert Scollier comes into the pits as well, and it starts to cast doubt now onto whether the lead bike Wayne Gardner can stay out there for the 2 hours that team manager Peter Malloy is anticipating.
Whatever else, the closer he goes to 2 hours, the more definite it is that he will have to hand over the riding when he does make his stop. Because already Pretty's team have penalised themselves some 10 odd minutes in their next riding stint by leaving Pretty on the bike.
Trying to get the last ounce of fuel into it, rocking the tank now to try and get it in. And a long stop. They've gone over 35 seconds already. There's only Wayne Gardner.
If Gardner can get to 2 hours, they can get through with 2 pit stops, whereas the team number 5, Andrew Johnson, Greg Pretty, must now do 3 pit stops.
Andrew Johnson, Greg Pretty has been in. He's lost a little bit of form now, falling back to 6th place with that fuel stop. 3rd place, I beg your pardon. What was the reason? Was it just fuel?
The reason coming in was fuel. The reason why we didn't change over riders, when you start a race off and all the riders adjust to the wet, they all take about the same time. But when he's setting a good cracking pace like that, you don't send out another rider who hasn't been riding in the rain during this race. It'll take me about 4 laps to get to his pace, his lap times. Therefore, send him out again. Hopefully they'll send out another bloke, then bring him in for 1 lap only. I only do 1 lap, which breaks that rule, 4-hour period. Hopefully this technique will win the race for us.
So Greg Pretty, in fact, is going to ride as much of the race as possible from your team.
Yes. I hope he can handle it. His hands are giving him a bit of trouble. He's getting very cold out there. A lot of the people got rubber gloves over their gloves, but Greg hasn't. But he's got a lot of. He's a very brave young boy.
Let's just classify that. You, in fact, intend bringing Greg Pretty in for only 1 lap, going out for yourself for 1 lap, and then sending Pretty out again for the rest of the race.
Yes, but I'm going to do 1 lap to break his 4 out. Then the last 2 hours, I'll do it straight and sprint.
And in the meantime, Kelvin Witchelow has dropped bike number 14, one of only 2 Hondas in the race. That's the CB900 4-cylinder, the other being a CBX6.
Bike 22, John Wood, into the pits for the 2nd time. He was the leader in the 750cc class for the first hour and a half. It would appear on the fuel stops that they've got water in the fuel and they're not picking up any sort of power out of the engine. So Wood in now for a 2nd unscheduled pit stop, and that'll drop him right back in the 750cc class.
Into the pits on bike number 1 goes Neville Hiscock, in 2nd place when he went in, but now with Pretty having pitted only 6 seconds in arrears, he goes back up to 2nd, and Hiscock is immediately 3rd. Just fails to get to the 2-hour mark, so is still on 3 pit stops, having run for 1 hour 53 minutes. Now handing over to his co-rider, South African Dave Peterson. Peterson distinguished himself here last year, coming home first in the 750 class as they dive away, co-riding with Steve Trinder on a 750 Suzuki.
The pit stop, 22.5 seconds, a slow one for the Maddix team. We expected better than that for a fuel stop from them. They've practiced down as low as 6.5 seconds, and with themselves looking at 8 seconds for a fuel stop. So the rain does worry you, and the competition. Bike 26, leader in the 750cc class. Alan Blanco into the pits right now. Behind him, way down the pit road, is bike 3. That's the leading Yamaha XS 1100 of Stephen Gall, who gets off the bike and puts Ron Bolden on it, the twice Australian champion. Bolden, the first one out of the pits. Behind him, bike 36, Glenn Fenton coming through. That's Ron Bolden now out onto the circuit.
Just over 100 laps gone in the Castrol for 1981, and bike number 1, Neville Hiscock, Dave Peterson are into the pits for the first of the major fuel stops, and Dave Peterson out on the bike. Neville, what are the conditions like out there?
Well, it's very wet, as you can see, but and it's also very slippery, so you've got to really feel your way.
And what's the policy from your point of view? Are you just going to rest it, or are you going to try and push it a bit more?
We want to take it easy in the early stages of the race and make sure we're still there at the end, but if we have to, we can go quite a lot faster towards the end, but you also got the big risk of falling off.
Are you feeling any pressure at all in that second spot, because you're getting it from Greg Pretty all the time and you're still chasing Wayne Gardner?
Yeah, the pressure's on the whole time, but we've just got to try and keep our cool and try and stay on there.
What's Dave like in the wet?
Dave Peterson's very good in the wet.
So we're looking for him to make up a bit of time?
I hope so, yes.
And as Peterson circulates on bike number 1, the interesting thing is that the 1100 Yamaha of Bolden and Gall, which was hoping to do only 2 pit stops in the dry, has failed to do so in the wet. And there we see Roger Hayes handing over to Malcolm Campbell. Hayes doing the first stint partially because he did so last year when partnering Dennis Neal, but also because Malcolm Campbell's leg that was broken at Bathurst was too weak to do the run in the Le Mans start over to the bike. But here comes the Tasmanian, who qualified it brilliantly yesterday in only his second race ride since a nasty accident at the same point at which the James Hardy was stopped at Bathurst with the accident up there at McPhillamy Park. That's where he came off, and has had only 1 race meeting previous to this down in Tasmania, where he did 3 races and won 2 of them. So he's really back in the saddle in great form.
Roger Hayes, along with Dave Hiscock, have just pitted. That's 4th and 5th placings on the table at the moment. And Roger, you've fallen back about 1.5 laps behind the leaders after running from pole position. Is that part of your tactics?
No, we just can't go any faster. I think we're doing good enough just to stay in that position we're in. The two front runners are just going too quick, you know, just like last year. You know.
And so it's really wet weather riding ability that's knocking you back a place or 2.
Yeah, well, I think it's all boils down to how big your height is. Yeah. I could go a lot quicker, and I was tempted to, but you know, it's a long race and we've got a long way to go yet.
Yeah, there's no telling, in fact, whether one of the other riders might become a bit tired or go a bit harder, and you've got a place to get up.
Yeah, well, we finished second last year, and we were a lot further back than this at the beginning of the race. So we're hoping to go a bit quicker at the beginning and see if we can pick it up near the end like last year.
So there's no need to be anxious just yet?
No, the main thing is just to stay on the motorbike.
In the saddle for 2 hours and 5 minutes, the race leader Wayne Gardner at the top of the hill at Amaroo Park at almost maximum speed. Have a look at the bike go sideways there, and the talent of the boy that kept it upright. He's been called in by his pit crew and will be in very shortly, and is going to have to make a lightning stop, almost an impossibly quick stop, to retain his lead over Greg Pretty, doing a second stint on bike 5.
Here he comes to the pits. Wayne Gardner is the only one of the leading contenders to get past the 2-hour mark, and that means that he could conceivably take one pit stop less than anyone else, but this is going to have to be a quickie if he's going to retain the lead from Greg Pretty in second position. Gardner staying to the slow speed into the pits. Peter Malloy, his team manager, stops the bike.
Yeah, Robbie.
The last Matic pit stop was slow, very slow. Rob Phillips gets on the bike, Wayne Gardner off.
On the corner, hold it tight all the way, right? You better drive. Be careful down the straight, it's really slippery. Put in top. Take it easy for a while. Sorry, get the starter, mate, we'll do that.
22 seconds again. Slow pit stop.
And Pretty leads by almost half a lap. Greg Pretty at 2 hours and 6 minutes into the race lead now on bike number 5, about 30 seconds, half a lap in front of bike 6. Settling into the bike, Rob Phillips on number 6. You heard the instruction there to him from Gardner, who did such a great job, not only in leading and sustaining the pace he did, but in eking out the fuel to get him past 2 hours. 22.6 seconds the time. The lead from Pretty on 5 to this man Phyllis on 6, and he'll undoubtedly drop time, perhaps not later in the stint, we'll have to wait and see then, but certainly while he's settling in for the first few laps.
With me after 111 laps in the Castrol, the race leader Wayne Gardner in. Wayne, what was it like out there?
Really treacherous. I was going a little bit slower than I did last year because I just want to sort of stay on and just keep going. That's the main thing, you know, here today. I'm sure Robbie can do a real good job, and you know, hopefully be there at the end again.
You were getting a little bit desperate there towards the end of those last 2 laps. Any problems with tiredness?
No, what it was it started running out of fuel, and every time I'd sort of put the power on, be nothing, and all of a sudden it'd come in the big whack and it started sliding. So I had to pull in, otherwise it's just getting too dangerous. I had about, I suppose, another litre left, but it was getting to the point where I was making the bike too dangerous to ride. But a couple of times I sort of got, you know, overdoing it a bit myself, and I just sort of started talking to myself, saying, oh, listen, cool it, you know, and you'll be right.
Right, well, you came in and out again and you still maintained your lead. You have a 10 to 15 second lead, I think, still in first place. How's Rob going to go?
I'm sure he'll go very good. He's a brilliant rider. And I think he's starting to use his head a lot real lately, and he's winning a lot of races in Australia, and I'm sure he'll do very good. I've got a lot of faith in him.
And what about your pattern now, your tactics for the rest of the race?
Just to keep going and stay on the bike, that's the main thing. I don't know what they're doing with tyres and stuff like that, but I think just keep cruising, you know, just the way we're going now, and hopefully we'll be there at the end. Thank you.
In fact, Greg Pretty is 29 seconds ahead on this bike from the Wayne Gardner Rob Phillips machine. So Gardner did lose the lead in the pit stop, as Greg Pretty now 2 hours 10 minutes into his riding stint is in the saddle and in the lead. Today is Greg Pretty's birthday. He's 26 years of age and he's looking for a big win to celebrate. And look at the slide from Greg Pretty. That's the sort of conditions we're looking at out here. Oh!
That's taken him, though, to a 33-second lead. He's pulling out big hunks of seconds on Rob Phillips, but being very adventurous in doing so. And one wonders if after 2 hours and 10 minutes of riding, you can see slippery conditions, but of his senses becoming dull, his hands and feet getting cold, the chill factor very high. Dennis Neal, that must be a dangerous time, the jubilation of hitting the lead, the feeling that everything's going right for you, but you're not quite as sharp as you were when you started.
Yeah, that's right. Greg's hands and feet, as you said, were getting very, very cold. Plus, his visor looks like it's pretty clear. I had a lot of problem last year with the visor fogging up. But it's not quite as cold today, so it doesn't seem to be the problem it was.
And part, of course, of what's driving him is to try and maximise the lead now, build it up as much as he can while Phyllis is settling in and slower than he.
Yes, he'll be aware of that fact, and he's absolutely ridden the bike to its limit all day. There wouldn't be a lap goes by where he hasn't got it out of shape.
Well, in fact, at 111 laps, his lead, and he's down, and that's just what we were talking about. He had a lead of 22.6, it went out to 32.11, then it went to 36.57, and that's what we're talking about. But look at the man wanting to get back on the bike, Pretty. But this is absolute disaster for team number 5, entered by Jeb's Helmet. Let's have a look. What does he do now? How does he feel? Is the bike in good order, or does he have to go to the pits? Co-rider Andrew Johnson, not yet on the bike, will be distraught, and you can see the effort dissolving by the second now. Ignition key jammed or something on the top of the bike, and Pretty is gradually or quickly coming to the realisation that a brilliant effort has fallen apart. Let's have a look again. You've seen him in some wild slides. But Dennis, when a bike of this weight and power on a track like this starts to go, impossible to catch.
Especially in that part of the track, because as we mentioned before, that's about the fastest quarter in the circuit, the second fastest quarter in the circuit. There's no room for error up there.
He realised he was running wide. He was trying to hold it tight, yes, because he'd have gone immediately if he'd got onto the dirt there.
I think he's overshot the corner a bit. Now he's just going to pull a bit too much front brake on by looks. Yes, the front wheel's gone down.
Yeah, gone too wide and missed, in fact, his braking point for the next corner.
Right.
That's Andrew Johnson with him there. Both riders trying now to work on the bike, Andrew Johnson and Greg Pretty. Johnson distraught. Look at the man. Won the race last year. Just wants to get it back into shape, but it's now been 2.5 minutes since the bike went down. That's 2.5 laps of Amaroo Park, and that alone, when you're up against competition like Wayne Gardner, is the end of the story. Dennis Neal, that must be the most concerning, most fraught moment that a rider can have when he's out there trying to get the bike started again.
Terribly frustrating. I know exactly how the boys feel there, particularly Andrew. He's so keen, and he's such a highly strung guy. You can see how excited he's wanted to get the thing
Okay, she's fired up. Andrew's managed to do it. And with 3 minutes, 12 seconds lost since the bike went down, Greg Pretty looks like he's going to go straight back into the race.
Interesting to see if it still steers reasonably straight.
Ron Bolden says, after you. He's not going in, he's in fact going round the circuit again, so he'll go for a lap to see what the bike's all about. Ron Bolden with him, and in fact he passes Bolden up the main straight, so Greg Pretty is back into it. But that's fairly dicey stuff, Dennis, when you consider that he doesn't know what condition the bike's in.
That's right, it's a real gamble. I'd certainly be taking a lot steadier for the first couple of laps just to feel exactly how everything is. I think his feelings are probably running so high, and he's so upset with himself at the moment for falling off. He's probably not thinking too rationally.
Where it all happened, 1 lap, 3.5 minutes before. No, he's going to come to the pits for sure, isn't he, Dennis?
Yes, it certainly looks like there's something wrong with it. I'd say he might be having trouble shifting gears. It's amazing that the gear lever wasn't damaged, because it fell very heavily on the left-hand side.
so. The first significant fall of the race, and only the third fall of the race after 2 hours 15 minutes, which is quite incredible in itself. Greg Pretty pulls to the pits, and the birthday treat falls to nothing.
Greg, you've dropped it in Honda corner. What happened, mate?
I was trying pretty hard. I found I was making up most of my ground under brakes. So the back tyre was starting to slide a bit, so I was having to try even harder. In this particular lap, coming down into Honda corner, I just squeezed it on a bit too hard and down she went.
Were you trying to make any time at all on the leader?
Well, I was just trying to go as fast as I could. The spray's pretty bad at times, and I found that if I kept trying to keep the pace up, my concentration was right there. So, however, this time I just locked it up. So,
and we noticed you took the bike around for a further lap. What was the reason for that? Check out what damage there was to the bike?
I just wanted to feel out what was wrong with it, if there was anything wrong. And I felt some oil coming out of my left foot, so it appears I've worn a hole through the alternator cover when the bike went down. So the boys will try and replace that now.
How serious is that now to your chances?
Well, if it stays wet, I think we can make up the ground, but it just depends on how much time they take to change the cover.
Well, the best of luck, Greg Pretty. Back on the bike, Andrew Johnson, or almost back on the bike, Andrew Johnson. They're straightening the forks there. Any other major damage to the body of the bike at all, do you think, Greg?
I think just the instruments at the moment, but the handlebars are still straight and it still seems to be steering okay, so as soon as the cover's replaced, hopefully we should be back in the ring.
Lap 131, 2.5 hours down, and the race of the co-riders is on. On bike 6, Rob Phillips, co-rider to Wayne Gardner. On bike 1, South African champion Dave Phillips. And they are neck and neck. Phillips has been roping in Phillips, or rather,
Dave Peterson.
Dave Peterson has been roping in Phillips, and there he goes into the lead, a new leader. These are teammates, but the Maddich Western Underwriters team said that there would be no #1 bike specified, and it was up to the riders to do what they wanted to do, as Dave Peterson has almost enough at Winfield Corner. Peterson has been hauling in Rob Phillips by up to 3 seconds a lap. And he's showing just how well this South African man can ride. Last year, of course, he was third outright in the Castrol 6 Hour and won the 750cc class, riding with Steve Trinder. This year, stepping up onto the big GSX 1100, he is going brilliantly. Certainly an able co-rider. Look at that, in a lap and a half, look at the gap that he's opened back to Rob Phillips on bike 6, co-riding with Wayne Gardner, the bike that's led virtually from the start. And the new leader all over the machine. A lot of body English from Dave Peterson. Dennis Neal, if Rob Phillips is going as slowly as he obviously appears to be, it's going to put a lot of pressure on Wayne Gardner when he gets back on the bike.
Sure is. I'm really surprised at the way Dave's going. He's obviously had a lot of weather experience over there in South Africa. Because Rob, who he's just passed, is known wet weather rider here in Australia and won a number of major races in the run.
Does it raise points that perhaps there could be a problem with the bike?
Well, yes, there could be. It's very hard to tell from here, but I'm sure his team will be watching what's going on there, and Wayne is going to have a job in front of him if this continues much longer, the gap that he's pulling out now.
The 750 class in this 12th Castrol 6 Hour has been dominated by Suzuki's, as has the outright class. But a cat among the pigeons in that area is bike number 24, lying second at the moment, Richard Schooler and Peter Fleming sharing a Yamaha XJ750. They qualified 16th fastest. They're lying 9th outright, and they're lying 2nd in that class to Alan Blanco, Bob Toomey on bike 26, a Suzuki 750. But going well, with still more than half the race to go. Nothing wrong at all in lying 9th outright. Pulling themselves up well from their grid position, seeing off some 7 bikes that were quicker than they in practices. Interesting bike, the 750 Yamaha. Hasn't quite got the pace of the Suzukis in the class, but a very sophisticated bike. It's got anti-dive built into the front suspension, all sorts of mass of pistons and piping on the front forks, so that when the bike brakes, it tends to try and hold the nose up, stop it diving down so hard, keeping more weight on the rear wheel and allowing you also to get more front braking. Quite some interesting electronic gadgetry on it too. An electronic diagnosis system. Comes with very high handlebars. You can see it's almost a semi-chopper style. It's 45 seconds behind the class leader, so it's on the same lap as the class leader, the Blanco Toomey Suzuki number 26. But the tank rises up quite high, and it comes as standard with quite high handlebars, although that is one of the few items that riders are allowed to replace for the race, so it's running here with much flatter bars. In 3rd place in the class is bike number 23, the Rod Cox Robert Scolyer Suzuki number 23, and there it is, right in front. So 2nd place in the 750 class, about to catch 3rd place. 2nd place on the same lap, 45 seconds behind its class leader, but about to pull out a full lap. On 3rd place, number 23. 4th place in the class, Max Thompson, John Behrens. John Behrens, a motocross expert, riding a Kawasaki Z750. Race leader, after 1 minute short of 3 hours, and therefore the halfway mark in the 12th Castrol 6R, is David Peterson, presently riding bike number 1, which was run in the first stint by Neville Hiscock, the New Zealander. Dave Peterson from South Africa, doing a great job, 49 seconds in the lead. From bike number 6, the Wayne Gardner Rob Phillips Suzuki. 3rd place, as you can see, Roger Hayes, Malcolm Campbell. On bike number 7, they're 28 seconds in arrears, and then it's 55 seconds from them back to 4th place, number 2, Neil Chivers, David Hiscock, younger brother of Neville. 5th place, the Stephen Gall Ron Bolden Yamaha, number 3. Then 6th place, and different colour for the first of the 750 class bikes, the bike that's led that class most of the time, all but a few laps, Alan Blanco, Bob Toomey, another Suzuki. Then in 8th place behind them, another Yamaha, the 2nd of the 1100s, Len Willing and Rodney Brown on 4. Bike 24, 2nd also in the 750 class, Richard Schooler and Peter Fleming, a Yamaha XJ750. Bike 30 following is Max Thompson, John Behrens on the first of the Kawasaki's. Incidentally, also the fastest qualifying Kawasaki, ahead of an 1100 fuel injected, that one being a 750 carburettor bike. And in 10th place is number 28 Murray Hill and Bernie Summers, another of the XJ750 Yamahas. With Peterson showing flying form, it indicates a race distance, as we're some 40 seconds now past the halfway mark. 157 laps at that halfway mark indicates about 314 laps for the total race, which would be just 2 laps more than the previous slowest race, the first one, or the previous shortest race. 312 laps to the winning team of Brian Hindle and Len Attlee in 1970 on a 650 Triumph. Last year, run a lot in the rain, but with a dry last segment, 322 laps was the race winning distance to Wayne Gardner and Andrew Johnson. Peterson's in great form. He's pulling out at least 3 seconds a lap on Rob Phillis, riding bike number 6 at the moment. So he really is very much at home in the wet conditions, running along with Greg Pretty and Wayne Gardner as the real mud pluggers. The rain streaming down heavily again, and there is absolutely no chance of the weather lifting or of the track being dry, so riders are faced the first time ever in the history of the race with an entirely wet Castrol 6R. An important point in the calculations is that although Peterson has a 54-second lead within a dozen seconds of a full lap lead over second-placed Wayne Gardner, Rob Phillis, the Gardner bike is faced with only one more pit stop, whereas this one on its first session form could have 2 more pit stops in front of it. So the race situation is not yet resolved by any means. And the way Peterson's riding it at the moment, it doesn't look like he'll get a 2-hour stint out of that bike.
Some quite incredible racing in the Castrol 6R. Richard Scollier here on Yamaha XJ750 has taken over the lead in the 750cc class. Just 12 minutes ago, he was 15 seconds behind bike 6, the class leader Alan Blanco on the Suzuki GSX 750. In that short period of time, he's caught up the 15 seconds and opened a 4-second advantage over Blanco Toomey, and that's the sort of riding, the inspired riding, we're seeing from some of the competitors here today. The mist quite incredible over the back of the circuit. The rider's visibility about what you saw through our lens there, because it's a constant battle to keep your visor clear so that you can see the maximum amount of distance ahead of you. And it's not easy. You can see there on bike 24, the Scollier Fleming bike, that indeed the rider's visor is somewhat fogged up, and in fact on that bike at the moment is Peter Fleming. Behind him, Australian champion Ron Bolden on the Yamaha XS 1100. Bolden at the moment in 5th position, 2 laps behind. The leader of the 750cc class is in 6th position, 3 laps behind.
The oil flag out and the travelling marshal indicating the patch of oil there on the run down from the Dunlop loop on towards Mazda corner, where a bike has fallen over, John and Craig Blackburn's Suzuki 750 number 34, and slid all the way off the track, spilling oil and petrol into the barriers there. Rider okay, and the bike's now been moved, but has created treacherous conditions for the riders coming through. You can see the rainbow-coloured hue of the petrol and oil slick, very large and right on the line, particularly too when a bunch of bikes come through and they have to move out a bit wide. See everybody there sticking in awfully tightly to stay clear of it.
And here's the other inspired ride in the race. Just at 12 o'clock, 1 hour 25 minutes ago, Dave Peterson was almost a lap behind. Now he's come to almost a lap ahead. He is about to lap the second placed bike in the race, bike 6, Rob Phillis. He passed Phillis, you'll remember, to take over the lead, and now he has opened a 1 lap lead on him in less than 1 hour, and there he goes waving to his teammate, bike 6, Rob Phillis. And I don't think Rob would appreciate that one little bit, because to drop a lap in something like 50 minutes is, my goodness. As bike 7 in third position, the Roger Hayes Malcolm Campbell bike with Campbell in the saddle also takes the opportunity to come through. Campbell is 1 lap down, and if he can get through bike 1, Dave Peterson, he'll unlap himself.
But has now moved up to second place outright by overtaking the somewhat slow Rob Phillis. So quite an interesting change of complexion there with the outright placings. 1 lap advantage to bike 1 in the hands of Peterson, who, if he can get 2 hours 5 minutes out of a tank, only a couple of minutes more than Wayne Gardner did, he'll cut a pit stop on that bike and take it through to the end of the race with just 1 more stop. And then 1 lap behind them, Malcolm Campbell, now on behalf of Roger Hayes, with whom he shares bike 7, now moving into second place, pushing Phillis and Wayne Gardner combination on bike 6 back to third.
But what an incredible ride from David Peterson, the South African, on this bike number 1. Moving all over the machine, keeping attitude off the bike, using his balance, a tightrope act he's working on this motorcycle, and doing it so well indeed. Probably the second fastest man on the track, if not the fastest, is Malcolm Campbell, the man who set pole position yesterday. There goes Campbell. Peterson's got to let him because Campbell's got the line. So Malcolm Campbell unlaps himself from Dave Peterson, and now only has to do 1 more lap of the circuit than Dave Peterson to get to the lead. That won't be easy.
Ferocious riding in the conditions, and Dennis Neal, one gets the impression that the riders are starting to forget now about the track conditions prevailing as they start to get into some real scraps.
Yeah, these two are having a great dice here, and it'll be very interesting to see what happens actually. Because Malcolm's, as said earlier, it's only his second ride back from badly breaking his leg at Bathurst, and in caution to the wind at the moment, he's really going for it.
The race leader, Peterson, 5 seconds in front of the bike just overtaken. Rob Phillis on 6. Has completed 182 laps of an expected race distance of the order of 314, 315, thereabouts. Some 30-odd minutes more in the saddle, 32 at least, to get to the 2-hour mark and to cut them back to 1 pit stop to run them to race end.
1 hour 20 minutes in the saddle, 1 lap and 4 seconds in the lead. Dennis Neal, David Peterson's starting to look a bit ragged.
Yeah, yes, he's making some funny pit signals here too. Can't quite work out whether or not he's got a problem with the bike, but it definitely is getting out of shape, especially in the last few laps.
It seems a bit of a crazy thing to be doing, to be riding that quickly that the bike would be getting out of shape when you've got a lap advantage.
Right, yeah, I can't understand. He's got a very organised pit crew there. I'm sure they'd be keeping him informed with what's happening. But it's pointless taking the risk that he's taking.
Word from the pits is that they think the rider's getting tight. I think that'd be a reasonable assessment.
Right. It's actually not moving around on the bike anywhere near as much now as he was in the earlier lap, so he might have a cramp.
The possibility, therefore, that Neville Hiscock is getting ready in the pits to take over from Dave Peterson, who nonetheless has made a magnificent effort to get the bike where it is at the moment. And yes, in fact, David Peterson is pulling to the pits at this stage. So he's coming in early.
Got on the bike at 11:54 and has been on it about 1 hour 40 minutes. So they're faced with yet another pit stop after this one.
Fuel tank's in. Dave Peterson's off. Instructions from Neville Hiscock to Dave Peterson. 10 seconds gone. 15. Cap down, bike started. And away in 19 seconds. That's the fastest pit stop so far for the Maddich team. Knocked 3 seconds off the last time.
And does, of course, retain the race lead, but has another stop to go without any shadow of a doubt, with 2 hours and 24 minutes of the race still to run, whereas if that 24 minutes can be sustained by the reserve rider, Rob Phillis, on bike number 6, putting Wayne Gardner into the saddle for the last stint, that bike will have only 1 still to run. But here is David Hiscock in the saddle again. Sorry, Neville Hiscock on 1. 30 years old. As we pick up the race leader going up the hill at Amaroo Park on his 203rd lap, the situation is there before you. He leads by 1 lap, virtually, from bike number 6, the Wayne Gardner Rob Phillis bike, still with 9 minutes to go before getting to the 4-hour mark, and therefore only 1 pit stop remaining, and still a pit stop remaining for the lead bike. 3rd place, Roger Hayes, Malcolm Campbell, and keeping pace at this stage with the race leader. 4th place, the Yamaha XS 1100, being ridden by Ron Bolden and Stephen Gall. Didn't get to the 2-hour mark though, so that's going to have at least 3 pit stops. 5th place outright, Neil Chivers, Dave Hiscock, another of the 1100 Suzukis. 6th outright, leading the 750 class, the Richard Schooler Peter Fleming Yamaha XJ 750, put there by virtue of some brilliant wet weather riding by the number 2 rider Peter Fleming, pulling out 3 seconds a lap on Alan Blanco, Bob Toomey, who were dominating that class for most of the race, but are now back 7th outright and 2nd in class. Then another 1100 Yamaha number 4 is Len Willing Rodney Brown, and there is the race leader, just lapping 2nd place. 2nd place, number 6. Now 68 seconds in arrears, for that is the average lap time for the first 200 laps. 68 seconds, including pit stops. The quickest lap we've seen was about a 66.5 on lap 70, when Pretty and Wayne Gardner were in the bloom of the performances that they put on earlier today. So bike number 6 is hoping that with the magic in the rain of Wayne Gardner to come on the final stint, and that is at least, they hope, 7 minutes away, and with 1 less pit stop to do, they hope that a lead of 68 seconds is not enough to stop them coming to the checkered flag first.
And at the 210 lap mark, 4 hours completed in the Castrol 6-hour, a change of place as Roger Hayes on bike 7, takes over second position from bike 6, Rob Phillis. Phillis has now done the 2-hour stint that he had to do on the motorcycle, and in the next couple of minutes we expect to see him pitting to hand over to Wayne Gardner, and then the fireworks will start with Wayne Gardner on the Suzuki GSX 1100, who held first position for the first 2 hours, has seen teammate Rob Phillis drop back to third position, but they have an advantage. They have one less pit stop to make than the bikes in first and second position, and with Wayne Gardner on the bike for the final 2 hours, expect to see Wayne Gardner somewhere near the lead at the finish. Bike 6, Rob Phillis goes through there. He's now picking up valuable fuel economy times to give the team a good chance of going through to the finish without another fuel stop should the weather clear, which is most unlikely, in fact absolutely impossible at Amaru Park today. He'll go to the end of this tank, which as I say should not be more than another few laps, to ensure that should it miraculously clear, the weather miraculously clear here today, that Wayne Gardner will have the very best chance of getting to the finish without another stop. Phillis not giving anything away to Roger Hayes either. The passing manoeuvre happened 3 laps ago, and Phillis is staying right with Roger in second position. Both of them a lap and 5 seconds behind bike 1, the leader, Neville Hiscock, sharing with Dave Peterson. There's the leader, bike 1, Neville Hiscock. Superb ride from both Hiscock and Dave Peterson in this race to date. But they'll have to take another pit stop for fuel only. It's very unlikely that tyres will need to be changed. Certainly the wet weather last year saw no tyre changing occurring, and it dried up in the last couple of hours. Nifty Neville Hiscock gives a pit signal which probably isn't in the code book, but it indicates that all's well with the bike.
The unmistakable style of Andrew Johnson on bike number 5. Doing a great job. He's pulled it back from 16th place after that fall from his co-rider Greg Pretty and subsequent pit stop to 9th place now. Got it onto the leaderboard. And the bike immediately in front is number 26, running second in the 750 class, Alan Blanco, Bob Toomey. Suzuki 750 number 26. Prior to that is Len Willing, Rodney Brown, Yamaha number 4, and then the 750 class leader number 24, Richard Schooler, Peter Fleming. That has been one of the more remarkable rides of the race, actually. Peter Fleming on 24. Johnson there, as you can see, really out in a rush, and he's got nothing to lose except perhaps a bit of skin and some bruises, because in this position nothing around 9th, 10th place attracts Andrew Johnson or Greg Pretty very much. They want to push the bike back up towards the front as far as they can. They've obviously got no chance. There's some 5 laps down on the race leader, no chance of challenging for major placings, but will still undoubtedly make quite a number of placings in the remaining 1 hour 54 minutes.
The critical pit stop for Wayne Gardner and Rob Phillis into the pits now. 2:07 the time, so they've got past the 2-hour mark. Wayne Gardner on the bike, Rob Phillis off. 15 seconds gone. Something squirting from the front of the bike. I don't know what that is. Overflow from the fuel perhaps. Fuel's in. 25.2 seconds to stop, and Wayne Gardner heads off with 1 hour 50 remaining in which to work his way back from a lap in arrears to win the Castrol 6 hour. Can he do it?
In fact, it's going to be a fairly close race by the end, but we're not going to see it for some while because Gardner's pit stop has now put him, of course, the substantial part of a lap and a half behind the race leader, but that leader has a stop still to come. It's only after that stop, and it at the moment is falling as heavily as you could possibly imagine. The rain is just teeming down. You can see it there. You can see it from the spray the bikes are picking up. You haven't seen that sort of spray and surface water all day. And Dennis Neal, it's a big pressure task now for Wayne Gardner.
Yes, right, it sure is. He's obviously been given the word from the pit crew, the exact position, so he'll be going all out now to try and pick the time up in the remaining hour and a bit.
The average times of the race leader right to now, over 4 hours odd, has been 68 seconds. But Gardner, and indicating a problem there with fuel tap, perhaps. It was the fuel tap he was pointing to.
That Robbie Phillips might have turned it back to the main position. He might have left it on reserve. He's probably just questioning or not back to the pits if they had, in fact, turned it back.
But Gardner earlier today doing 67.2, and in fact in a real rush at one stage down into the 66s, and those are the sort of times he's going to have to reproduce.
Last year Wayne was doing consistent 66s when he had the tremendous dice with Johnny Pace, so he's obviously quite capable of it, providing the bike is all as well as it should be, which it looks as though it is.
There's a potential, let's say, at least a second a lap.
Yes.
And 100 laps to go.
Right, so that's going to put it right.
So that's a minute
up.
40, plus a pit stop to come. So they're looking good.
Yeah.
If you can say anybody's looking good out there on that sodden track, with as slippery as it is, and with as much traffic as is still around, because really a remarkable number of bikes still running.
Yes.
There'd be more out, I think, if it were dry.
They're very incident-free. It's amazing. Amaroo Park offers really good traction. Once you get apart from the, away from the first slipperiness, the initial rain, it's been raining so steadily now all day. It's really quite grippy.
Motorcycle enthusiasts are watching this race at more than 216 stations throughout Australia, and I'll bet that people at places like the Club Hotel in Wilcannia and at Port Hedland are just wishing right now that they had the rain that we're getting right here at Amaroo Park, and we wish they had it too. Race leader, Neville Hiscock rather, at high speed there, having a couple of moments as we took a musical interlude, and showing just how much the rain is coming down at the moment. It's raining cats and dogs. Hiscock knows it, he just hit a poodle.
Quick and fairly desperate work by the marshals here to stop that flow, to try and stop and to fail to stop that flow of water, but worse, grit and sand and gravel that's going with it right across the track. And you can just imagine the riders sitting up a little bit trying to keep the bike just a little bit squarer as they go through that. There it is, just broken the levee banks, so to speak, and no wonder, because we must have had, oh, I think 3 or 4 centimetres of rain, 300 or 400 millimetres at Amaroo, and there's the frozen hand of an ABC employee emerging from under a blue bit of what was probably weather protection 3 hours ago, but has long since failed in that purpose. But it's alive. Calling into the pits, the race leader, bike number 1, the Dave Peterson Neville Hiscock Suzuki 1100. Into the Matic Racing team attention. Time of day 20 minutes past 2, so 1 hour 40 to run. This is their final pit stop. Seat off though, trouble. Water into the air cleaner perhaps, or electrics. The air cleaner usually stored under the seat there. How do you see it, Dennis Neal?
Yes, they certainly look like they've got a problem there. It's pretty hard to work out exactly what's wrong with Scummy again now.
But quickly back on. It's not hard to remove. A key in the tail section there releases the seat. 29.5 seconds in the pits and out again. But now the race to the flag starts. 1 hour 40 of Wayne Gardner on 6, chasing bike number 1 with Neville Hiscock in the saddle. Here he is. And have they got a problem?
I think they actually did, thinking back on it, replace the air filter, so that would be logical.
Worried about it clogging up perhaps with water, yeah, and reducing the airflow?
Seeing that it's been wet all day, yeah, I think they've had a few problems along those lines, so that probably with the lead they have just taken the precaution.
Could end up with the bike running, what, a bit rich if it gets too much water in there.
Not enough air, too much fuel. Seems strange that they wouldn't put a bit of petrol in while they call in for that stop. Thumbs up.
Yes, well, thumbs up for one problem, but the crew only had to watch themselves to see the other of the bike getting very crossed up there. One of the most unlikely motorcycle race riders you'd ever come across, a very shy, quiet, retiring sort of chap, Neville Hiscock. And there's a fall at Winfield Corner. Looks like an 1100 Kawasaki, could be the Ross Cannon bike. It's not, it's the John Wood, John Bundy, number 22, Suzuki 750 that was running well in the 750 class, but in more recent times has had numerous pit stops and troubles. And the information from the pits is that bike 6, Wayne Gardner, Rob Phillips, will be going back to the pits. So what looked to have been a perfectly planned run of just over 2-hour riding stints for the first 2, and therefore only 2 pit stops, Wayne Gardner in the saddle for the final 2 hours, has for some reason fallen apart, and it's due to make a pit stop in a moment. The bike they're all chasing now, Neville Hiscock on 1. His lead 53 seconds over second placed Roger Hayes, Malcolm Campbell on 7, and it's 46 seconds further back to third placed number 6.
Heading for his last scheduled stop, the Roger Hayes, Malcolm Campbell bike in the pits took their last stop at 1:40. So this one will get them through to the end. They're in second position, and a very quick stop, less than 15 seconds, but suddenly something's gone wrong. Away again. and that little halt cost them about 10 seconds or so. They're 1 lap and 15 seconds down, but the way Malcolm Campbell came out of the pits gives you a strong indication of what he's going to be trying to do in the remaining 1 hour 20 minutes in the Castrol 6 hour.
And he's nice and dry. He's got a new set of, well, let's say a dry set, an old set of leathers on, and just a long sleeve type t-shirt over the top to keep some of the rain from beating their way through the leathers.
Now this team didn't change the air filter that both the Managed Western Underwriter Suzukis have. So it's interesting to note that perhaps this team doesn't believe it's down on power, and certainly Malcolm Campbell has proved to be one of the major riders of the day.
But that was when Fabien Ferret realised the race was over and he had another 25 points.
Stop for your team, is that right?
Yeah, that's the last one.
You were making up some pretty rapid time out there. It seems you took a fancy to the...
We went out from halfway on to try and consolidate second place, not to go after the leader.
Right.
And we're just going to hopefully hold second place until the end.
Right, so Malcolm's going to be taking it fairly steady out there, is he?
Yeah, unless something wrong goes, you know, something happens. But the way it's going at the moment, we should be all right.
And so where would you think you'll finish? What, second place, about 40 seconds behind?
I think it's something like that. I'm not sure if we're 40 seconds or a lap behind, I'm not sure.
And looking back on the race so far, do you think there's any place where you could have gone a little bit better, or do you feel it was just the conditions against you today?
I reckon I could have gone faster. I've been home watching it on TV.
Oh, well, Roger, there might be next year, mate, if you retire.
No, me and Malcolm will come back for next year.
Well, in fact, at this particular stage, Malcolm Campbell is 1 lap and 60 seconds behind. In other words, Neville Hiscock is almost on him to double lap him. That's the distance that this leading bike of Neville Hiscock and David Peterson has opened in the 6 hour, and my goodness, is Malcolm Campbell twitchy up the straight.
But even more interesting is the fact that only 9 seconds behind him is Wayne Gardner on bike number 6.
That's the distance between second and third positions in the race.
So with Gardner in the groove, and as you can see, Campbell not yet so, and very ragged. A very dangerous period of the riding stint. Just these first few laps, when a rider gets on, is full of enthusiasm, he's feeling fresh, he wants to get stuck into it, he knows that others are travelling more quickly, he's trying to find the limits, and there's been numerous occasions when people have come undone at that time. Ron Haslam was one, Alan Hales has come down in those conditions, not long on the bike last year, trying to make up ground, and came off fairly soon after taking over. As he comes by again, we'll get another gap on him.
About to pass first place in the 750cc class, the Richard Schooler Peter Fleming bike. And he's through.
But Gardner 8 seconds behind now. He's picked up a second. And right on Gardner's hammer, that 8 seconds in arrears, is the Dave Peterson Neville Hiscock bike, now with Dave Peterson riding. So bikes 7, 1 and 6 in the first, in all the major placings, first, second and third place, separated on the track by only some 8 seconds.
Into the pits, the Neil Shivers Dave Hiscock bike. They're in 5th position, 2 laps down on the leaders. And they're gone, a very quick stop indeed.
And here's a great chase. The race leader is still bike number 1, Dave Peterson, riding with Neville Hiscock. But perhaps with a pit stop to come, and here it is. And so with a lead of 1 minute, 43 seconds over bike number 7, the Malcolm Campbell Roger Hayes bike, that's only 3 seconds in front of the flying Wayne Gardner on bike number 6. The race is wide open.
And this is the second unscheduled stop for this team. They took an unscheduled stop at 2:22 this afternoon. Dave Peterson now getting on the bike. Neville Hiscock off. 15 seconds. It starts. 18 seconds to stop. Dave Peterson out.
And 1 hour to go. 60 minutes remaining in the Castrol 6 hour for 1981.
And there's the dice for second and third position on the road. That's what we're actually seeing. Bike 7, Malcolm Campbell behind him. Wayne Gardner, bike 6. Gardner's been reeling in the Malcolm Campbell machine, and Campbell's been very desperate in second position, trying to, as Roger Hayes said in a pit interview recently, consolidate his second position. Well, it's not consolidated, because look at Wayne Gardner just move up on him right now. These two bikes are racing for second position.
Campbell on bike number 7.
Gardner now is in second place on bike number 6. Malcolm Campbell goes back to third on bike number 7. And the gap from bike 6 forward to the race leader, bike number 1, is 1 lap plus a little bit. And we'll give you the seconds in just a moment. But what it amounts to is that Wayne Gardner, with 1 hour to go, say 55 odd laps, is making, if he makes more than a second and a touch a lap, he can catch the race leader here at the top of the hill, and that's the gap. It's the lap plus that little bit only. Now watch Wayne Gardner out after him, unlap himself. This will give us a good measure of how much time he can pull back in the remaining 58 minutes. A young man from Wollongong on bike number 6 knows just the task in front of him. This is the first part of that. Thank you. Goodbye. And now he is on the same lap as the race leader. And it stepped out a bit there, but it wasn't a disconcerting moment for Gardner. He handled it very smoothly.
In fact, I should point out that last stop of the Dave Peterson bike was their third scheduled stop, not an unscheduled stop. It was surprising to some people, in fact, that when Hiscock took his unscheduled stop at 2:22, the team then didn't take the opportunity to fill the bike with petrol and put Peterson on it and turn it into a scheduled stop. This dice really is on.
Gardner's lead in that less than a lap is a second and a half, so it is well within the ability of this young 22-year-old to make up the lap that he needs, as Campbell, on the other hand, has a crack at Peterson. Now, Peterson's just on the bike, and therefore will be quicker in a few laps' time. And the other question is, with the riders starting to charge harder now, will one of them make an error? Dennis Neal, the incentive could not be bigger. And for people like Malcolm Campbell on 7 and for Peterson on 1, there's only one tactic, and that's to go flat out, and there's a lot of risk in that.
Actually, all these three riders ride that way. They really win this all they're really after. Second's nowhere in this race. It's first, second's nowhere. So I'm sure that's what they'll be having in their mind right now. Caution to the wind, so to speak.
Well, with 1 hour left in the Castrol for 81, there's an air of victory starting to creep into the Maddix racing team as we all get drowned here in the pits. Neville Hiscock just in off the bike. Neville, you had a great run out there, and you must be feeling slightly confident now, your team.
No, not yet. Still an hour to go, anything can happen.
Well, you did a great stint on the bike. What's the condition like out there? Is the track virtually as bad as it has been all day, or is it getting worse?
Yeah, I think it is getting worse. It seems to be very slippery now. There's a lot more puddles on the ground too. You've got to really pick your line well.
We've noticed a couple of puddles of oil too, oil film across the track. Are they bad at all?
Yeah, I don't think it's oil. I think it's petrol. It's nearly as bad as oil anyway. You've got to make sure you miss it.
How big's your lead now as you're holding on to number 1 position ahead of your teammate?
Yeah, we're about a lap and a half ahead.
And is it safety first from here on in?
Yeah, definitely. For both riders, I think we'll be just aiming just to stay there.
And this will be, what, your biggest victory, wouldn't it, if you knock this one off?
Oh, if this one comes off, this will be, yeah, the biggest.
This is a fabulous motorcycle race. The last 43 minutes of the Castrol 6R with 275 laps to the credit of the race leader, bike number 1 being ridden presently by Dave Peterson. He has a 44-second advantage. In 3rd place is this bike number 7, absolutely flying. He's doing some of the fastest laps of the race because he's chasing Wayne Gardner on 6, and he's chasing the leader, and each is catching the other. It's only a 5-second gap from Campbell, absolutely flying in only his 2nd race since a serious and bad crash last Easter. He's staying with Wayne Gardner, not letting him get away, and they are both hauling in the race leader. What a fabulous finish we look to have in front of us. They're pulling in better than a second a lap. That's Gardner there on 6, and only 5 seconds behind him is Campbell on 7, who hasn't given the game away. And some 44 seconds in front of them, in front of Gardner. In other words, probably somewhere down out of Honda Corner towards Winfield Corner is the race leader. And that's Peterson, the South African. Campbell has reduced his lap times from a 67.4 down to 66.85 and then a 66.45. However, on a slow 67.5 second lap, his gap to Gardner has gone back up to 6 seconds, but that could be only temporary because he was staying with Gardner for very many laps. And both 2nd and 3rd, to summarise, both 2nd and 3rd, Gardner on 6 in 2nd and Campbell on 7 in 3rd, are lapping faster than the race leader and have the potential to catch him by race end.
.43 seconds the gap this time round. The distance between 1st and 2nd positions continues to become less and less.
And that means that 20-odd seconds have come back into the hands of Wayne Gardner from the moment when you saw him unlap himself with Dave Peterson a little while ago.
Gardner, one of the smoothest men on the track, but even he now just a little bit ragged. As Gardner comes down into Honda Corner, bike 1 comes up over the hill, so there's half a lap between bike 1 with Dave Peterson and bike 6 with Wayne Gardner, the 2 major international riders in the Castrol 6R, and they're showing just what that international experience means right now as they try and keep it on the island and yet, in Peterson's case, stay ahead, in Gardner's case, catch it. Peterson, as he's done all day, all over the motorcycle, keeping attitude off the bike, taking the balance himself. Gardner more as one with the machine.
And Peterson's lead down to 41 seconds now. Still 6 seconds the gap between 2nd and 3rd. So both of them coming forward still. And the rain bucketing down, coming down in streams. He's pulled back half a second, 41.5 seconds to the South African, getting into the groove and running out there to the ripple strips, the slippery paint right on the edge of the track. Yeah, used.
Oh, and there's a fall. Someone's down over the top of the hill. Bike 32, Roy Chamberlain, the Sydney rider, on the Yamaha XJ750.
In motocross,
he was
type
in fifth position.
And the steam, of course, is from the water arriving on the air-cooled cylinder fins. Motocross boots would have been a bit of an advantage there. One of the few advantages of the wet weather is that if you do go down, the landing's usually fairly soft under these conditions.
Fifth position in the 750cc class. And there he goes. Thankful that there's so much water on the infield because it helped him to slide.
There's a very rough and rocky section in there, actually.
23 minutes remaining in the Castrol 6 Hour for 1981, and frustration for Wayne Gardner. After lowering his lap times lap after lap for 15 laps in his pursuit of Dave Peterson in the lead, he's now been trapped behind Greg Pretty. You can see there in the orange overalls, and the times are starting to tumble. Finally, Gardner gets through just like that. But Pretty's held him up for the last 3 laps, and his times of the distance between first and second place has increased from 31 seconds to 33 seconds, and with a very small amount of time remaining in the Castrol 6 Hour, Gardner needs every lap to crank this big Suzuki Open to catch Dave Peterson. He does not need to be held up by someone like Greg Pretty at this stage. Pretty in 8th position and 3 laps in arrears, so he could not be in contention in the event. But the race's edge, Pretty just had to make it difficult for Gardner to get through.
Second shortest distance ever covered in the 12 Castrol 6 Hours. The first one, 650 Triumph, ridden by Brian Hindle and Len Attlee, did 312 laps. They'll pass that fairly easily. But last year's 322 laps, of which quite a number were run in the dry by Wayne Gardner and Andrew Johnson, they won't quite reach that, so they'll fall just a little bit short. But a cracking pace being set at the moment by Peterson, here in the lead on bike number 1, by Gardner, who had a real chance. It really did look as though he could catch him, but now, some 10 minutes later, it doesn't look quite the same sort of possibility, where once it was just a bit over a second a lap, now it's nearly 2 seconds a lap. And the other thing is that Malcolm Campbell in 3rd place was really chasing, at one stage staying 5 seconds and then 6 behind Gardner in 2nd, but he has let it go and is consolidating 3rd. It is running out now to 26 seconds behind him. But Gardner pulling the gap back down again to 30 seconds, and he has 21 minutes, just under 21 minutes to go.
In 3rd position, bike 7, the Roger Hayes Malcolm Campbell machine. On the same lap, 26 seconds behind Wayne Gardner. And Campbell, less dicey than he's been since he got on the motorcycle some 40 minutes ago, but dropping back. The penalty he's paying for the smoothness that he's finding, or for the safety that he's achieving, and making sure that he'll get to the end of the race.
Coming up to lap where Len Willing and Rodney Brown on the XS 1100 Yamaha. They're running 6th outright behind the 750 class leader, which is bike 24, Richard Schooler, and Peter Fleming on the XJ750 Yamaha. Quite a remarkable track record the XJ750 is building up. It's very much a sophisticated road bike. With anti-dive suspension, all sorts of electronic instrumental gadgetry, and shaft drive, and a semi-chopper riding position. And yet in its only 2 really major race outings, the Yamaha 750 race at Oran Park. It came up trumps there, although it was perhaps the slowest of the 4 750 bikes on the track, but finally won in the hands of Len Willing and Rodney Brown, and now has come through in the 750 class here too. There's Campbell forcing his way through, but is 27 seconds in arrears to Gardner on 6, who has pegged back the gap between himself and the race leader to 28 seconds. He's not going to give it away until the checkered flag falls in some 19 minutes' time. Behind the 3 leaders, bike 1, 6, 7, is 4th placed number 3, Ron Bolden, Stephen Gall, Yamaha 1100. Then bike number 2, Neil Chivers, Dave Hiscock. They're running 5th. And then the first 750 class bike, number 24, and there it is. 6th outright, leading the 750 class. And as we were saying, the XJ 750 Yamaha.
And there, in fact, are the 2 leaders. The leader of the 750 class, bike 24, Schooler, and behind him, the leader outright in the Castrol 6-hour, bike 1, Dave Peterson, in the orange and yellow. The Schooler Fleming bike has opened 2 laps and 32 seconds on 2nd place in the 750cc class. Alan Blanco and Bob Toomey on a Suzuki GSX 750. Quite an incredible ride from Fleming at mid-distance, and it's really paying off now in the closing stages.
They are in fact back in 8th position outright, with bike 4, the Len Willing Rodney Brown 1100 Yamaha that we saw briefly a moment ago, in 7th place between them. Being left there is the Ducati Pantar of Terry Yates, Michael Coughlin. There's 2 Pantars running, one of them a 500, which that one is, and one of them a new Ducati Pantar model, the 600. You might remember the wonderful ride from Lee Roebuck in the Coca-Cola 800 in conditions just as wet as these, where against superbikes up to 1100 cc's he brought one home 3rd, the diminutive 500cc bike. But here's the best place of the non-Suzukis, because it's been a race dominated in practices yesterday where the 5 fastest bikes were Suzuki 1100s, and during the race today by Suzukis in both the 750 and the unlimited class. But the Yamaha 1100, number 3, being ridden presently by Ron Bolden and Stephen Gall, has run well all day, but has been unable to match the pace of the more performance-oriented Suzuki 1100s. This is very much a touring bike, a lot of mid-range torque. It makes it a delightful bike on the road. In fact, I had a week with that particular bike, which, just to emphasize the stock standard nature of the bikes, it was sealed out of the crate, and they had no hesitation at all in handing it to me and to other people who've road tested it in the period in which they were running it in for this race. And yet that bike, as assembled in Japan, not blueprinted, pulled down at all before the race, good enough to be running 4th outright. Shaft drive, like its smaller 750cc brother, which has a lot of appeal in terms of lack of adjustment and easy wheel changing for touring conditions, and running 2nd in the 750 class, 8th outright, is this bike that early on was leading the class, leading it very well, Alan Blanco, Bob Toomey.
Toomey, the New Zealand 750cc production champion, who's having only his 2nd visit to Australia. In his first ride here, he was in the Yamaha 750 race at Oran Park. Never got to ride when Neil Shivers crashed the bike early in the day. But certainly they're going fairly well today to be in 2nd place in this quality field. And it is a quality field. While there have been C and D grade riders competing, they've covered themselves in glory today with the way they've kept out of trouble and kept the pace right up. The Castrol 6 Hour for 1981 was promoted as a race of riders, and I think today every rider in the event has proved his capabilities in the most trying of conditions.
Campbell looming up there on 7. And with 14 minutes remaining, exactly 14 now to the race end, 301 laps completed by the race leader. Gardner, in his pursuit of the race leader, has 2 seconds a lap to make up if he's to win, because he is some 27 seconds in arrears at this stage. Campbell there on 7 is 31 seconds behind Gardner, and he's of course still in 3rd place. And in the last lap, Gardner has made no ground on Peterson. This is the man we're talking of. The man that goes back to England next year, will go back shortly, or is due to put his signature on a contract to ride superbikes and Formula 1 bikes for the Honda factory in England. Wants to go to Daytona next year and is negotiating about that. And also has the possibility of getting a bike in the glamour class of all motorcycle racing classes, the 500cc Grand Prix class. Doesn't think he'll do Isle of Man. That treacherously difficult to learn circuit. Some 37 kilometres around. 26.2 the gap that Gardner's chasing. 302 laps completed. 12 minutes, 10 seconds remaining. The task impossible, but he won't rest until the flag falls. He'll keep on forcing and riding and sliding and pushing until he's forced to stop. Notice the different exit line from Honda Corner there, the most notable wet weather difference in lines around the track, where the riders come out of the corner extremely tight, then set the bike upright and then gun it with the thing sitting fairly vertical off towards Winfield Corner. Much better than the classic racing line of sweeping out wide on what is a fairly long sustained exit, but which under these slippery conditions would not allow them to slap the power on hard there at all. Particularly out of that corner, Dennis, which in 2nd gear the bike's pumping out a lot of power and very prone to wheel spin. The corner that Peterson's approaching now.
Right, yeah. It's much better line to keep it very tight, get the bike upright as soon as possible, get the power to the ground. Same thing in this Winfield Corner here, or stop corner. Lean it over, pull the brakes on and get it upright and fire it again.
Dennis Neal, this sort of thing was your specialty, production bike racing, fastest qualifier for the last 2 years, although it was an event that eluded you. That was frustrating for you.
Yes, I've had most of my experience on the production bikes. The last couple of years Honda provided me with a super bike, which was a lot more exciting to ride and actually quite a lot safer. I tend to spoil you a little bit riding the super bikes. They've got better tyres, better brakes, and to get back on the production bike was a little bit of a letdown, but nevertheless in Australia that's where the glamour and the money really is. It's in the production scene.
But as a lap record holder at many circuits and fastest qualifier here and has often led the race, you know as well as anybody how hard the race is to win, because it was something you never managed.
That's right. People like Alan Hales, who've ridden, I think, in almost all the Castrol 6 Hours, it took him 10 years to win it, so it's certainly very difficult. You've got to have everything going for you.
After that crash at Easter, your bones and everything are okay now. It's just the nerve, is it, in your left arm that's a problem?
Yes, I severed the radial nerve in the left arm in the accident, and they're very slow to grow back. I've been in for a number of operations now, and the doctors seem to be confident that it will eventually return full movement and feeling, but it's a very slow process.
If that comes back to being fully operational, do you see yourself back in the saddle here perhaps next year?
Still, that's a very difficult question. I really am missing the racing. I'd love to be out there, except for today. But a year is a long way to be, is a long time to be away from a sport such as this. So I'll just have to make my mind up then when my body's back.
Well, the one thing that you could be fairly certain of, surely, is that it won't rain next year, having rained 2 years in a row. And that might be a bit of encouragement to you. Let's have a look at the situation. 9 minutes remain. 305 laps have been completed. The gap first to second is 25.5 seconds. To this man, Wayne Gardner, from the race leader, South African Dave Peterson on 1. In third place, 35 seconds behind on bike 7, Tasmanian Malcolm Campbell, doing a grand job after a nasty crash the same weekend as Dennis Neal came off Bathurst last Easter. In fact, John Smale,